Hey, my name is Tyler Boronski. You're watching my YouTube channel. We're sitting down with recognizable faces in professional sports and entertainment. Today's guest, you know him from a couple of the different podcasts he's hosting, including Increase Your Impact and Diggin Deep with Moonball Media alongside World Series champion Eric Hosmer. He's a former mental performance coach helping out organizations like the Boston Red Sox, Cleveland Browns, and Tampa Bay Rays. He's also a TEDx speaker, teaching others how to use timeouts in their own life. But now he's currently running the Performance Advisory Group, helping coaches excel as leaders for their own teams. He's Justin Suwa. Justin, hello. Thanks for joining us from the car today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say, excuse my office right now. And so thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation, Tyler.
Absolutely. Well, this conversation with Justin, we're going to split up into a couple parts. He's going to break down kind of more his philosophies and his career background in the mental performance world. But then I know he's had an interesting career, a lot of cool stories, a lot of people he's run into over the years. So we'll split it up and share those stories in another video. Justin, you've made a name for yourself as well online, very active on Instagram, X now. Just really all over. I want to start with this annual post that you do every year. You always put out the 11 questions to ask yourself before the year is over. Now that we're a few weeks into 2025, maybe a chance to reflect on this past year. One of the questions is, what did the year teach you? So what did 2024 teach you?
Yeah, so for me, thanks for mentioning that. I'm a huge proponent for reflection and taking the look back before you move forward to learn the lessons that the past taught. And for me, I think what 2024 taught me is the importance of really answering new problems. And what I mean by that, for many years, I was obviously with the Tampa Bay Rays, and I was solving different problems and with the Major League Baseball. And for the past year, I've had a chance to dig deeper into tennis and football and hockey and corporations and learning new problems and helping people solve problems in new systems with new relationships. And it was a lot of fun just to learn, and also how to run and operate my own company as a founder of the Performance Advisory Group, and taught me that, hey, if you want to start a new company, it's going to take a lot of work and exercising new muscles and learning new skills. And that's what it taught me.
You talk about you've been in a lot of different worlds. I know, like you said, you're into the Performance Advisory Group now, and we'll definitely get to that. But want to touch on that the mental skills coaching. I remember I think your solo episode with Diggin Deep that you talked about how 10 years ago you never even thought you'd be able to do something like this. This really didn't exist. And I know some of your earliest opportunities was with like the U.S. Army, IMG Academy. So I'm curious to hear about kind of the organizational perception towards mental skills coaching back then. I mean, what do you remember those initial conversations like with those organizations? I mean, was it more you selling them, or did they kind of see the value right away?
Yeah, I think in the early organizations, the military, I stepped into a warm seat, meaning that they already had their systems, they already had their departments, and in the military were called back in 2011 the performance specialists, and it was contract was already made, and so they knew essentially what we did, teaching mental skills for combat medics, military intelligence, wounded warriors, and I just think that was it was easy to go into. And then from there, going to the IMG Academy, they had a long line of mental conditioning coaches, and it was already established. Then going to the Red Sox, it was already established by Bob Tewksbury and those who came before, Laz Gutierrez. And so I was very lucky in that regard to come into organizations that already saw the importance of mental skills training. They knew what it was, they knew what it wasn't, and it was already set there for me. Where it got tricky is when I went into industries outside of those organizations for myself, and trying to go and pitch my services to little leagues and to gymnastics and to dance studios to try to get into different industries. That's where it got tricky, where they're thinking, like, what is this? What is sports psychology? What are mental skills? And that's where, in order to sell myself, I actually had to sell the industry and what exactly it was and how do you quantify it and how difficult it is to quantify. And so that's where it got really tricky. But yeah, I think the field is or early in the early 2010s, it was around, but it wasn't as popular as it is now, where you see a lot of mindset coaches and mental skills and mental performance, and a lot of organizations have it, and a lot of people teach it, and so it's neat to see how far it's come over the past decade or so.
You talk about how it was hard to sell to the organizations that weren't so familiar with it. How did you quantify it, like you just touched about? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that's still in limbo. How do you quantify just psychology in general? A lot of the research is fickle. Anytime you have an industry where the experts disagree with each other, tells you that you're not quite sure. Sometimes just do the best you can with what you have. And so I think really what I try to do is to say, I'm here to solve these problems and to give people some simple systems. And you hear people talk about, oh, I have a hard time quieting my mind, or I have a hard time being confident, or I have a hard time being focused. And now it's really understanding, okay, what does that really look like? What do you mean by lacking focus? Okay, where does it happen? What does focus look like to you? What does it not look like to you? What are some habits we can create to increase the probability you'll be more focused? When you lose focus, what are some systems you can create to be able to bring your focus back? And so it's not cookie cutter. Hey, everyone needs a mantra or everyone needs deep breathing. It's very nuanced to and tailored to the person. Yeah, there's some tech now and some technology, whether it be heart rate variability, there's some mindfulness or some meditation, but really it comes down to what works best for that person. And I think it really comes down to, instead of pouring into athletes and organizations and just kind of shoving mental skills down people's throats, it's also pulling out from people and asking them to reflect and asking them to share what's working with them. But they need to be able to trust you to be able to do that. What are their insecurities? Where do they lack focus? Because a lot of times when you're working with elite athletes, they don't want to divulge that information. They don't want to share that. And so it takes being able to build a relationship. This isn't my phrase, but I love it. Build a relationship so strong it can bear the weight of truth. And that comes with time under tension and building where they can really trust you so you can really get into the work.
To that point, does it kind of fall in line with this saying that I've heard you say in like other podcasts before, that like players don't need a prescription, they need perspective? I mean, what do you mean by that, I guess, essentially? And how does that philosophy like kind of influenced when you were a mental health coach? Like how did that philosophy kind of shape how you had those conversations with guys?
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point. And I think in some cases, they do need a prescription. In some cases, they actually do need a tool or a tactic. And there's a lot of context involved. When you're working with young 10-year-old kids, when I first started, yeah, you're going to teach all of them visualization. You're going to teach all of them breath work. You're going to teach all of them about the importance of self-talk. And you can teach them certain things. But as you work with the best in the world, a lot of them, some of them don't want to meditate. Some of them don't want to visualize. Some of them, a routine for them, it is too stringent. And when they lose, instead of giving them a cookie cutter prescription, hey, do this when you lose or do this to build focus, sometimes just pausing and is putting things in perspective. It's zooming out and just seeing the big picture. And sometimes it's zooming in and getting the focus on today. Sometimes it's to pause and say, hey, have you experienced something like this before? And what did you do in the past that might help you in this situation? And then literally having them just pause and say, you know what? Yeah, like I have experienced that before. And this is what I learned back then. Or it's pausing and saying, what can this experience teach you? How can you get stronger because of it? And then as they start to share those answers, when they're in the right state of mind to share those answers, there is no technique, there's no tactic, there's no strategy. They pause, they think, and then they come up with their own answers. And so that's what I mean by sometimes perspective may be the answer instead of a prescription. But again, sometimes it is a prescription to help them. And so it's being able to understand, what does this person need at this moment, at this time?
I do want to ask another saying I've heard you talk about before. It's if you want better answers, just ask better questions. And it sounds simple, but what's a way, maybe an example of you working with someone, how you're able to help them create that mindset shift and see significant help when they kind of learn how to ask themselves better better questions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There was a time I was working with a Major League Baseball player, and he kept asking himself the question, "What if I suck? What if I
Mm,
embarrass myself?
mm.
What if I mess up? What if I lose it for the team?" This is a Major League Baseball
Wow.
player
Yeah.
sharing this, and as we're talking, and he's not complaining, he's just kind of thinking about these things, and his mind it tends to go to the worst case scenario. And then all we did was reframe the question. So,
Mm,
what if you dominate? What if you do really well? What if you're the MVP? What if you save the team? Now, I'm
mm,
not saying that to be Pollyanna and, oh, just think positive, happy thoughts. Not at all. All we're trying to do is neutralize the mind, because the probability of worst case scenario might be the same probability of what best case scenario. All we're trying to do is to get him from one state to get as ridiculous as the answers were for the worst case scenario. Let's make it as ridiculous on the best case
yeah.
scenario. Not to say that that's either one's going to happen, but then we can understand, okay, what's most likely to happen, and how can we prepare for it, and what can we account for, and what do we need to do to minimize the probability of worst case scenario
Mm,
happening. And so those are just some simple
yeah.
things. Instead of asking yourself, why me? Why does this always happen? Why do I always strike out? Why do I always miss this pitch? Instead of saying that, you can ask, what can I do to get better?
Mm,
How can I learn from this? Who can help me improve on these things? And so it's essentially understanding the mechanism of our brain. And whenever you ask yourself a question, your wonderful brain is going to go find answers to substantiate and give you answers to that. If you always asking, why do I suck or why am I terrible? Your brain will give you evidence to that. But if you're like, what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? Your brain is going to gather resources to help you answer that question as well. So that's why I always like to say, if you want better answers, start asking yourself some better questions. And in a long line with that, after games, a lot of times I'll have players ask themselves three questions. Well, what did I do well? What did I learn? And
mm,
what am I going to do better next game? And those three questions tend to nudge you towards being more positive, being a learning machine, and being in the driver's seat to focus on what you can control. And so those are three questions I always
yeah.
encourage athletes to ask.
Yeah, I love that. And for your example, like you gotta look at both sides at the end. If you're gonna say, "Am I gonna suck in this?" Well, you say, "What if I do great as well?" So I do like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And again, just to reiterate, it's not to be Peter positive and,
Right.
oh, just be
Yeah.
positive in this. No, not at all. It's literally just to neutralize your mind, to get you to reframe your situation so you can think, be a little bit more rational in your
Mm.
decision making.
As I mentioned, I mean, you're not with the Red Sox or Rays anymore, but you're still very involved by talking with them on the Diggin Deep podcast with Moonball Media. It's a newer company, really like a year old at this point now. What have you enjoyed about that experience so far, and really like how their values align with kind of your values as well? How that vision meshes well for you
No,
guys?
I appreciate it. I love the people. It really the Eric Hosmer and Peter Moylan and Mustakas and it's just an amazing Anthony Seratelli and all of the rest of the crew from Moonball Media. When Hosmer reached out after he retired and he said, "Hey, I bought a media company. We're going to start a podcast and we're going to interview some of the best baseball players in the game," I was honored that he would ask me to be one of the co-hosts, and it's been a blast. And to answer your question, what I've learned, what I've enjoyed most, is just to have these vulnerable, open, deep questions
Mm,
with these athletes, so the world could see just the human side that I get to see all the time, that now they're able and willing to share with the world. And I've loved it. And I also love to hear the stories, and not just their success stories. I love to hear their stories of triumph, of
mm,
adversity and overcoming adversity. And in even some cases where they didn't, I guess they always overcame adversity in some way or another, but their failures, and for
mm.
them to share that on public television or in the public space, it's really inspiring to see, and I love it. And also just to hang out with all the hosts and the rest
Yeah.
of the crew, they're amazing.
Well, it's been fun to watch so far. You guys have had some really good guests, some nice conversations. Obviously,
Yes,
Eric's connections
absolutely.
definitely help with that too, getting some of the big name guys. But it's been fun to
Absolutely.
watch, and looking forward to this year with
Yeah,
baseball season. Really, a
thanks.
few weeks away, so crazy.
Yep, you're right. You're right.
Last thing for you for this first part of the conversation, as we mentioned in the beginning, you're now with Performance Advisory Group, leading the charge there, helping a lot of coaches excel as leaders. Why did you want to go that avenue? Because you did talk about there's been some challenges with that transition so far. So, what made you want to go that route moving forward?
It was really more organic than anything. For the past 15 years, I've been mainly player focused, which
Mm,
I am still working with some players. But my father is a coach.
mm,
I have a coach's heart. I've loved working with coaches, and to see how much effort and work and time they put into really pouring into the players themselves, I decided, you know what, let's go support coaches. Let's go help coaches. Let's give them the tools to help the players. Instead of me teaching a player and supporting a player and how to be confident, let's give those skills to the coaches so they can help the players. Instead of me uh, uh, using these tools to help a player relax, these coaches are with them all the time. And I love the opportunity to help them, not just in baseball, but in football, in basketball, in tennis, in hockey, and golf.
mm.
And it's been an absolute blast transitioning into this new world of supporting coaches behind the scenes. And it's been a year doing it, and I've absolutely loved it.